Hi guys, I'm back again. This time we have a great little project for you. It is a simple little Santa ornament, and you can make 3 of them and string them together and make a really cute little banner out of them as well. Very simple, very easy to do. I've done something similar to this for the Random Act of Kindness. We have a free pattern for a tiny little Santa Claus pin that uses the same techniques. This one is much larger. It's about 5 inches square, and I'm going to show you the techniques for working on much larger surface compared to those little 1-inch pins. We also have a giveaway this week, but there's a little bit of a twist. I have one of these awesome Dynasty Encaustics, my favorite fugly brush, for one of you, the one that puts my favorite color in the comment section. Now, if you paint anything of mine, you know that the color I use the most often is asphaltum, but I can tell you it's not my favorite color. So take your best guess, put it in the comment section, and the winner, first person to nail it, is going to get one of these favorite fugly brushes. So that's the giveaway out of the way. Don't forget to support some of the suppliers that you're going to see pop up on the screen from time to time. The brush guys at thebrushguys.com. And of course, Deckwart, my favorite, and Dynasty Brush. They are awesome and support me through all of these things. And they're very generous with their donations for giveaways as well. So make sure you send some support their way. All right, don't know about you, but I'm ready to play. So this is the little Santa that we're going to work on. He's very cute. It uses a really simple technique to create that background in his beard. As you can see, it's got all this text in it. I've actually used the page out of an old German to English dictionary to create his beard. And then the rest is just some basic decorative painting. Base coats for this and some fine stroke work for the details, a little bit of stenciling to jazz up the hat a little bit, and of course some spattering and some simple highlighting. So we are going to get started on that very first step, which is putting on this paper. So I've torn a page out of this old German dictionary. It's been around for years and years. I think the publication date on it is 1951. That gives you an idea of how old it is. And as luck would have it, the page is just the right width to fit onto the surface that I've chosen, which is this great little banner. These banner sets are available from the tollpaintingdesigns.com website. They have all kinds of beautifully hand-cut wood surfaces, but she also makes this great little banner set, which you get 3 of these little signs. So you can create a fun little banner using this little Santa. So step number 1 for this is a base coat. Now I've used light buttermilk. I just wanted a light color because this paper is very thin, and I didn't want perhaps some of the textures and whatnot of the wood grain to be showing through. So 1 light coat, and then I lightly sanded it just to remove any furring and any rough edges. So not a whole lot as far as the preparation. Now, the medium that we're going to use to adhere this paper is the Deckwart Medium Matte Medium. If you don't have it or don't have access to it, you can use a matte decoupage medium as well, or even a matte gel will work. But I prefer to use this matte medium. So this is what we're going to use for this. Now, I have my favorite fugly brush. I have a new one, doesn't have as much paint on it as the other one. And I'm going to put a generous but even coat of the matte medium on this surface. Don't worry about those holes. If you get some in there, it's okay. So you want it to go edge to edge and a nice even coat everywhere. So once that's done, it's time to put the paper on. And you want to make sure that this paper is wet. So I like to dip it into my water dish so that my entire page is wet. As what happens to paper when it gets wet, it stretches. And if you apply dry paper to a wet surface, you get bubbles and ripples and all sorts of nasty things happen. Whereas if the paper is wet, it already stretches and it will apply nice and smooth. So I've got that on there. I have perhaps a bit too much water, so I'm just going to touch it with the paper towel. And I'm going to take my brayer and I'm going to firmly seat that paper onto the surface. Just roll it out. This way there's no bubbles, there's no ripples. Everything is nice and tight. Very firm, smooth, and it's adhered all the way around, all the way to the edge. So you don't have any bubbles and whatnot along the edges of it. Now, ordinarily I would give this a few minutes to dry, just enough so that the paper isn't soggy. And then I'll take an emery board or a nail file and sand down and away. And that will help you remove that excess paper, but it does it so beautifully so that you have a nice, clean edge. Now, if you're doing this type of thing for craft bazaars and craft sales, you want to have a nice professional look to the work you produce. And this is one way to get that perfect edge. Very nice and clean. Even in those details, down and away, you don't saw back and forth, you'll just pull the paper off. But down and away, it literally wears through that paper and gives you a nice, clean, finished edge. We're almost done here. Just like that. Ta-da! Easy peasy. So now you have it nice and clean. All of the edges are smooth. There's no bits of paper sticking up. There's no rough edges anywhere. So now you can just set this aside to dry completely. And it'll be dry in probably 5 to 10 minutes. It doesn't take very long. So through the magic of television, I already have one prepped and ready to go. This one is nice and dry. Now, because this paper was so thin, I did not put a coat of matte medium over it. I didn't feel it was necessary. Simply because the paper was so thin, a lot of the matte medium came up through it, so it's fairly well sealed. You can use the matte medium after the fact to seal it all. So from this point, I trace and transfer my line drawing, and a lot of the time I will simply just take a pencil and draw my little guy in. Just like that. There is a line drawing in the pattern. It'll be available tomorrow, which is Friday. But you can simply draw him in and create your own characters, or you can use the line drawing that's already in the pattern. So it's really a very simple process to put him together. Once the line drawings are in place, then your next step is to start base coating. So I have this little fellow base coated already. So all I did was put 2 coats of country red on the top for his hat. I have 2 coats of light buttermilk for the brim of his hat. And then I used cotton candy for the skin on his face, and a lamp black for the eyes. The nose and the mouth are done with cotton candy and the country red. So it's a simple process. You don't need a ton of colors to do this. So now we have to begin shading and adding some of the details to this little guy. And one of the first things I like doing is adding some details, but with a stencil. And I love my stencils. So this is one of my favorites. This is this 1/8 polka dot. You can find this one on my website. It's in the M2 section under the M squared stencils. So I'm going to load up my stencil brush by picking up just a small amount, and I'm going to swirl it in both directions to get it a good distribution of color. And then straight up and down and in a circular fashion, I'm going to change directions frequently. And I'm going to put some simple polka dots on this Santa's hat. I'm not too worried about getting them perfect. I just want to get some color in there. There we go. We have polka dots. Now the stencil brush that I used is my signature stencil brush. It's designed for working on textured and a variety of surfaces. That's why there's 2 layers of bristle in it, and those are available on my website as well. So this is just about dry. Dry enough, as they say. We're going to talk about shading this little fellow. I'm going to use a slightly larger angle. Now, the colors that I'm going to use to finish this face, I'm going to use some Tuscan red. This is a really great red. And a little bit of asphaltum. Gotta have asphaltum on my palette. And lamp black. So first things first, let's put some roses in his cheeks. He needs some color in his face. So I'm going to find my dome blender. Here it is. I've got a nice little dome blender. And I'm going to pick up just a tiny amount, and I do mean tiny amount, of Tuscan red on that brush and swirl it in. And then I'm just going to lightly dry brush a little rose into his cheeks. It's not a ton, but it is a little, and it does change how he looks. Puts a little color in his cheeks. He's probably been out in the cold, so he needs some color in his cheeks. There we go. Now the shading for his face is asphaltum. It's a tiny amount on the brush, and I do mean a tiny amount. I have a little stray hair on my brush. Now I'm going to blend this very well so that the color is not too strong. And I'm going to shade to the outside edge and around the point of his mustache, under that little turnover in his hat, and again on the other side. Now this shadow is going to get walked out, but about 1/3 of the way. And then that same mixture I'm going to shade on his face, above his mustache, like so, and right above his nose. And again, right under the edge of his hat. Just like that. Now you'll probably have to deepen this a couple of times to get that nice depth, but each time you do, just walk that color out a little bit. And do the same thing on this side. So each time you do this, it's going to get a little bit darker and a little more defined. But we only want that color to come out about 1/3 of the way. So this lighter area in the center should make up 1/3 of that distance, and the 2 shadows on the other side should make up 1/3 of that distance. So now I'm going to start shading this hat. Now to get this nice deep shadow that we have on this hat, people will automatically assume that it's black, and I start with black, but I don't end there. So I'm going to take a little of that lamp black, and I'm going to load my brush and walk it out. And while the brush is wet, I'm going to pick up a small amount of that Tuscan red, and I'm going to walk that into that black. So that if you look closely, I've got what looks like almost a deep purple This is the shading color you're going to use for that hat. Black by itself is too harsh on this red. So adding that little touch of red in it marries it to the red in the hat. So I can take that color and I can shade quite aggressively with it. And I like going around the corner. And I'll do the same thing on this side. And by doing this gradually, I don't end up with a solid black line in those corners. So each time I put a layer of this color on, it gets a little deeper and a little deeper and a little deeper, so that that transition from the full-on country red out to this dark color here is much softer, and it's very subtle, but you can still tell that it's red. If I used straight black, it wouldn't do that. I'm going to make a little noise here for a sec. Okay, so now I'm going to put another coat of that same mixture, that lamp black with that little touch of Tuscan red. And you can see that color gets a little darker each time. But that transition is very smooth. There we go. So now I'm going to come back to that asphaltum and I'm going to do another layer. And again, it's going to get just a little darker each time. It gives you a lot of control doing it this way, instead of trying to get it all done in one go. There we go. So now I'm going to take that asphaltum, and this is where we start defining this beard. I'm going to come underneath that mustache and put a nice big float. And I bring it right up over the mouth and the lip. And right around. So now I've separated the mustache from the beard. And I'm going to put a float around the outside edge of the lower portion. Just like that. Now the idea being is that the center area on the beard is going to remain much lighter than the outside edge. And then I'm going to put a little shadow on the mustache itself. Up here. Just to shape it. And I'm going to do the same thing across the top and under the nose. And I'm keeping these areas here much lighter. I'm going to deepen a shadow here in the corner of his cheek. Just wasn't quite round enough to suit me. There we go. Looking pretty good. So we have this great little spot down here. I like to take a little bit of the warm white, and again I thin these colors out quite a bit. And I'm going to put a white float just a little across the bottom. Just to sharpen that contrast. That's all it is. I want that beard, the mustache, to stand out a little bit, so I'm just changing the contrast a little bit. I don't want it too opaque, because then all of that great imagery and that text will all disappear. So we're going to switch to a smaller brush, and we're going to add a highlight to the eyes. This is where this little guy starts to take shape. He starts to get some personality right about now. So it's a weak float, but I'm going to put a little float of warm white on the left side of each eyeball, and just in a little bit, not too close to the edge. Just a little. And where's that liner? There it is. So I have a nice little script liner. I'm going to add a little dip dot to the upper left side of that highlight. And now we have his wonderful little nose. So remember the mixture from doing the hat. We pick up a little of that lamp black and a little Tuscan red, mix them together. It's just a brush mix. You don't need to have a lot, but it's about 1 to 1. And now I'm going to put a little shadow on the right side of his nose, just like that. And then the highlight will be, again, just a touch of that warm white. Need a touch more than that. Just a touch of it. Okay, it's not cooperating here. Why isn't the paint going down? There we go. So there's the little highlight on the left side. And like the eyeballs, his nose gets a little impact point right there. Now I'm just going to deepen a couple of these shadows under his beard. I like these shadows quite deep. It just gives his mustache a little more dimension. There we go. Thin, heavily diluted coats. You get much nicer control over that shading. And around the edge, because I like it. Just like so. So now we're really getting there. We could add some highlight to his face. It's got those little rosy cheeks, but I'm going to put a little highlight point on each cheek. And now we get to do some of the fun stuff. We're going to do some simple little pine boughs. I'm using antique green for that. And I'm just loading it on the tip of the liner brush, and it's going to be done with 3 little comma strokes. Simple little comma strokes, nice and fine, just like that. And make sure that you do them randomly, just wherever, and at different angles. It just makes it a little more interesting. And he doesn't look quite so structured. Just like that. Don't need a ton of them. I'm probably going to do 4 more. Across. And maybe 1 down here. And then we're going to intersperse those with little dip dots. Now I'm using the Tuscan red to do those little dots and the end of my brush. And it's just to add a little color and dimension to this brim of this hat. Easy peasy. Now I'm going to make a little noise. I'm just going to turn on the fan and dry this very quickly. Now I have a nice little dry brush here. I'm going to put a little highlight on his hat, make it look a little frosty. And we're going to do something similar to the beard. Now this brush should be almost dry, and I'm just going to lightly dry brush in a little color just to soften this and give it a little highlight at the same time. This is a Dynasty Mezzaluna. It's essentially an oval dry brush, and it's a blend of synthetics and natural hair. These are really great for dry brushing. So there we go. Got a little bit of that highlight in there. Now I'm going to switch. I know this is going to sound like an odd mix, but here it is. I'm going to pull a little of the Bahama Blue on my brush right here, and I'm going to cool off his beard a little bit with just a light dry brush of that Bahama Blue on his mustache. Right where I put that white. Just going to cool things off a little, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the belly of his beard. Just kind of gives him a little cool feel. And you don't have to be too controlled with it. It doesn't have to be perfect. You just put a little bit in. And we are almost there. He's taken shape very nicely. So now I'm looking at my piece, and I really don't have a whole lot left to do. I'm gonna have to add a couple little highlights to these little holly berries that we put in, and it's just a tiny little dip dot, like so, just to make them shiny. So now we're going to start adding a few little details. And I absolutely love these. This is the Uniball Signo, the 0.38, which is that ultra fine. It's got a gorgeous Japanese gel ink. I like putting that little scribbly line along the edges, like so. Neatness doesn't count. We're not looking for perfection here. Use the pen to draw in a couple little eyelashes on our Santa, and to add that same squiggly line to the beard. Just like that. He's super easy to do. These are fun to do with the kids too at Christmas time. These are very quick and very easy to get done. So that same scribbly line goes across the top, but the hat, on the details of the mustache. I like putting it around the nose too, and that little bit in the mouth, just to give it a little hard edge. I mean, you can take it up here onto the hat if you want to, just to separate things and keep them looking soft and sketchy. Little eyebrows. He's getting there. So now we're down to the final little details, and in this particular case, it's going to be a little bit of spatter. I do like my spatter. And I'm not going to use black because I think it might be a bit too harsh, so I'm going to use asphaltum. And I'm going to spatter this little guy just a little. Don't want 10 tons of it, but I kind of like that texture. So there we've got a little asphaltum on. This guy would look super cute if you finished him with a glitter varnish. You can always add a little bit of glitter. And I'm going to pull a little of the white in just because I like that sort of frosty look that it gives. So a little bit of white on top of that. This little guy is super cute. And I'm quickly going to dry him. So I'm going to make a little bit of noise. There we go. So he's nice and dry. So we have two things left to do to finish him up. I like to finish the edges on my pieces, and I really like to use that like a metallic or a little bit of, especially with Christmas ornaments. So I'm going to use this. This is a Deco Color gold paint pen. This is an oil-based pen, and I just like to put an edge around it. And I like to have a little of that gold come over onto the front of the ornament. It just finishes it nicely. So I just literally color the edges, make sure that a little of that gold goes up on the face, just like so. It adds a little bling, keeps things festive, and it gives you a really nice finished edge on your piece. Now you might have noticed that when I put this paper on, I went right over the holes. It's easier than trying to punch out the holes. And so when you are ready to put a string on this to hang him, simply punch through from the front. And then that way the paper goes inside the holes, and then you get a nice clean finish. So finally, Santa can't have a hat unless it's got a pom-pom, so I've got a bunch of these little snowballs here. Little white pom-poms. Those are available at michaels.com. Most craft stores will have them. And I'm using a little bit of Aleene's tacky glue to put this in place. You can use a glue gun or whatever works for you, but I do like this tacky glue. Takes a little while to dry, but it is excellent for this type of thing. So then place your pom-pom where you want it, and he's ready to hang. If you paint 3 of these, you can run them as a small banner for the front of the hearth or for the Christmas tree, however you want to do it. So that's as difficult as he is. He's a piece of cake. And I think we're going back up to the front. Hi again. I hope you enjoyed doing this little Santa. I love doing these at the holidays, and I love them at the larger ornaments. They make really cute pins too. So if you're on my website, check the freebies section for the pin pattern. It is available in there. And the pattern for the ornaments and the banner will be up on my website tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. Mwah. Love you. Stay safe.